Hi everyone, my name is Daniel. I'm the Chief Instructor here at Canadian Flight Trainers, an online ground school provider in Canada. This video, I will examine and talk about threshold concepts and how those concepts relate to us in Canadian aviation. The presentation that I have for you today in this video is titled Speak Like a Pilot, Not a Parrot, and you will see why towards the end of the video. The information contained within the video is not fully original. The research has already been done. I've taken the information from some of the references here and contextualized it for your use and our use in Canadian aviation. When I talk about threshold concepts, I don't literally mean concepts relating to a runway threshold like runway lights or runway markings or aircraft that are on a runway. That's not what threshold concepts are about, especially in aviation. Threshold concepts are gateway concepts. They're concepts in a curriculum or in a topic or in a discipline or in a knowledge that are essential to kind of put everything together, to really piece it together. And if you are unable to actually master something like a threshold concept, then you are unable to really excel within an area that you want to learn or to work in, or just any type of discipline. Our land says that threshold concepts are essential. They bind a subject together. They're fundamental to the ways of thinking and practicing within a discipline. When a student or a pilot understands a threshold concept, the way that they think is transformational. And I relate it to this door here, that as you walk up to the door, it's kind of dark and you have the ribbon on the side, and then you walk through the door, you open it, and it's just a completely different area, and the sun is hitting your face and you're starting to get a tan, and then you close the door behind you and you're no longer in this room anymore. It changes your perspective. It changes the way that you think about knowledge. It changes the way that you think about a discipline. And you cannot go back, because once that change has been made, you cannot reverse it. And that's what a threshold concept allows you to do. It changes you. Think about when you have that eureka, that aha moment, when you're learning something, and then all of a sudden everything has been put into its place and everything makes sense. Usually you've overcome a bottleneck, or you've understood a threshold concept, and now everything is a little bit clearer in your mind. It opens up the way that you think about a topic, about knowledge. It opens up different ways of generating ideas in a discipline. You can think of it again as going through this proverbial door, or if you want to cross the finish line at the end of a race. You've been racing and then you cross the finish line. You can't go back and then go race again. Like, you're done and it's over with and you've changed as a person. You're probably thinking, well, aviation safety letter and threshold concepts, why is this important for us in aviation? Well, threshold concepts, when we're making lesson plans, when we're building curriculum in aviation, they underpin a lot of what we do and the ideas that we want our future pilots to embody. When we want to produce pilots that are safe, you need them to have certain behaviors. We need them to have certain knowledge requirements. And we have to identify what the concepts are that they have to master in order to actually do all of those things, so that we might be able to observe them later on. Or if we want to build skill on them, we want to hone our abilities as pilots, we transition here, as it says, and from novice to expert. There are certain things that we have to master to turn from student pilots, or to change from student pilots into becoming full-fledged PPL, CPL airline pilots down the road. And of course, as I started off, it underpins our curriculum, it underpins our real-world operations, whether you're at a 702, 703, or a 704, 05 level. I'm going to give some different examples here from ab initio, and then I'll give you another example from a 705 level of something that might be a threshold concept that you might be familiar with. Basic one is stalls. When a student in their ab initio world is thinking about stalls, they're usually associating speed and decaying speed with an oncoming stall, and then the airplane's going to fall out of the sky, etc., etc. But as instructors, teaching them to prevent an aircraft from going into a stall, we're teaching them about all of these other things. And we say that an aircraft can stall in any attitude and at any airspeed. But when a student hasn't actually seen that, it's very hard for them to actually understand that concept. So we have a video of a Cessna 150 Aerobat. Well, you can go on YouTube and look at it, but there's a video of a Cessna 150 Aerobat doing a half reverse Cuban 8, and the aircraft is pointed straight at the ground in this still frame. The stall horn in the video is going off at this point. The speed is not quite, it's just above stall. It's at the bottom of the green arc, so it might confuse a little bit of students. But the stall horn's going off and the airplane is literally on the brink of actually departing controlled flight. And this is a very different perspective than when a student is actually practicing stalls. By looking at this video and seeing this in real life, a student can actually understand, hey, it doesn't matter where the airplane's pointed. When the airplane is pulling out of this half reverse Cuban 8, the speed starts building up, and yet the stall horn is going off. It doesn't matter what the speed is, it's all about critical angle of attack. When a student is able to master this idea, and they fully understand it, they can now progress on to maybe spins. They can get their PPL and do some crazy, lovely, amazing aerobatic flying. And that's really a lot of fun once you get a lot of training done. But it all starts with understanding that a stall, it happens because of a critical angle of attack. It's fundamental to understanding, recognition, and recovery. So this in itself would be a threshold concept in aviation. That's an ab initio example. We also have from a 705 or a 704 operation, an airline operation, where you might have someone transitioning from a PC-12 going into a very complex airplane that requires 2 crew. You're no longer thinking as a single pilot making decisions. We're now in a crew using crew resource management, threat and error management, communication, workload management, leadership, situational awareness. There's decision making that goes on. And the way that a pilot is going to do that and the way that they behave when they're in this environment will show if they've actually mastered a threshold concept relating to working in a 2-crew environment. They're shifting from a single pilot crew, working together, captain, first officer, and mastering this concept is really fundamental to working in this environment and transporting passengers around. You don't want someone behaving like they're flying a PC-12, flying a Boeing 767 or an Airbus 319 or whatever airline operation airplane might be out there right now. We want people to embrace and fly the aircraft as a crew, but that requires a shift of mindset from being single pilot, and it requires a change to look and approach the job that they're now doing, to look at it and do it as a crew, as cogs in a wheel working together. So that's just another example of a threshold concept at the 705 level. Now not everything is going to come very easy. There are challenges associated with threshold concepts. Sometimes they're really difficult to actually identify when you're trying to build a lesson plan or when you're trying to develop a curriculum, let's say on high altitude flying or contaminated runways. You always kind of wonder, like, what do they really need to understand when they come out of the training that we are providing to them so that they can be safe pilots? And I have an example here of a chessboard. If you don't play chess or you haven't played chess in a really long time, you would not recognize that white is in a massive winning position. So sometimes concepts and the overall picture is very hard to see. Now, that's just one example of a challenge. Sometimes when we shift someone's mindset, you're really undoing something and then rewiring their brain to think in a different way, or you can try and add to it. But because of the irreversible transformation that's going on, sometimes this is very difficult for people to accept, and it's very difficult for people to adapt to that, especially when they've been doing something for a very long time, like flying a PC-12 for a very long time, or a Caravan, and then all of a sudden you're flying an Embraer 175 or an Embraer 190, it's a very difficult thing to do. And we have to be able to recognize that and help the students work through that transformation so that they can master the threshold concepts required for them to actually master the discipline or the job that they're trying to do, or the exercise that they may be trying to learn if you're doing any ab initio flying. Your job as an instructor is to address this in a lot of different ways repeatedly. We have to show students that there's benefit to mastering threshold concepts. And it's not going to happen overnight, especially massive transformational change. We have to repeatedly expose the student to this in a very positive way, embracing the learning factors that are out there in the Flight Instructor Guide, and making sure that there's a positive reinforcement and a positive transformation, even though it may actually be very difficult for the student to kind of mull through that. And we'll look at some better ways to kind of help students work through that a little bit later on. But we have to address them in our teachings, in our curriculum, whether you are a ab initio flight instructor, whether you're teaching CPL, multi-IFR, it doesn't really matter. You're teaching someone in aviation. We have to understand the concepts that are there and then address them properly through our training. Now, how do we know if someone is embracing or is mastering threshold concepts? Well, there are some observable behaviors that you might see from your pilots, that you might see from your students, to say that they are properly engaging with the material that you've provided to them, that they are mastering the threshold concepts. One of the examples I have is language. A CFI in Canada is a chief flight instructor, whereas in America, it's a certified flight instructor. In Canada, our medicals are categories, whereas down south of the border, they're classes of medicals. Or even communications on the radio, saying that you're declaring an emergency versus saying Mayday 3 times. These examples, while some people might say, okay, it's semantics, it's not semantics. If a student is using proper language, it demonstrates that there's a proper understanding of things like the regulations that govern our world up in Canada. It demonstrates that they are embracing that, they're engaging with the material properly, and it fosters a mindset, the professional mindset that we want in our students, in our future pilots, because we want them to be safe and we want them to be making correct decisions. And that starts based off of just proper knowledge. And by embodying that, they're correctly interacting with it. There's less misunderstandings and less misinterpretations when they start going and applying that knowledge and making proper decisions in their flying. And that is another behavior that you can see, is that if they're taking that knowledge and applying it properly, or if they're not applying that information properly. My biggest misapplication that is super common that I see all of the time in Canadian aviation is a misunderstanding of the regulations relating to aviation medicals. In Canada, CAR 404.04 states that, well, there's this chart that it states, but it's basically the validity period of medicals. And the validity period of medicals is based off of the permit, license, or rating that is held. It is not based off of the category of medical held. The category of medical that is required is outlined in Part 4 standards for the particular license. But the validity period of that medical is in this chart and based on the license that you hold. So let's take a student pilot permit, which is actually not on here. But we'll take a student pilot permit as an example. No matter how old you are, if you have a medical and you have a student pilot permit, your medical is valid for 60 months. And it doesn't matter if it's a category 1 or a 3 or a 4, it's valid for 60 months according to the chart. And then people might say, oh, but what about a category 1 medical? Cool, student pilot permit, it's at the bottom of the chart, 60 months, doesn't matter. It doesn't change categories unless you are assessed to a different standard. There's a misinterpretation, an oversimplification of the regulation so that people can understand it. And it's not that about understanding it, it's not about the semantics, it's are we making proper decisions based off of the knowledge? Are we learning the knowledge properly? Are we engaging with the material properly? And are we embodying that and embracing that in Canadian aviation to make safe pilots, to make proper decisions. Now, this is one example. You might see at an airline environment the misinterpretation or the misapplication of standard operating procedures or SOPs. I recall in a past life flying with a captain who said, "You always have to land flaps full in the Embraer." I said, why? Like, why do I have to do that? Where does it say that in the SOP? And then, of course, when you challenge this person, they can't really find it, or they find some obscure line that is completely taken out of context. So we've taken knowledge and we've misapplied it because the person wasn't taught correctly. And then if the person didn't actually go and engage with the SOPs properly in their books, then that first officer or someone else might go and just repeat what was said by the captain, said by the line check captain, the ACP, or whoever's doing the line and dock training. Oh, well, I'm doing this because so-and-so captain just said that that's how I should do it. But we as instructors have to go and challenge the student and say, well, did you look in the book? What do the procedures say? What do your SOPs say? What do the regulations say? We can't fall into the traps of oversimplifying, overgeneralizing information, because just then we start getting into really bad habits, really bad studying habits, really bad decision making, and then the level of safety gets reduced is what I'm really just trying to get at here. We want to build smart pilots who understand what they're doing and are able to contextualize the information when they go forward and fly. Now, I have already mentioned some of the causes that can lead to the misapplication or the misinterpretation of some of the literature that's already out there. Oversimplification is a huge one. As an instructor, our job is to bring the standard of the student up so that they know the knowledge. We're not here to oversimplify the knowledge so that the student can understand. We have to bring their standard up. The problem with oversimplification, and sometimes we want to simplify for the sake of the student based on the level of understanding that they have, we can use analogies, but we don't want to fall into the trap of doing wrong things, because sometimes oversimplification turns into wrong information being transmitted to the student, and then the student starts doing things because the instructor taught it very poorly. One, it's bad for the student. It's almost insulting to the student saying that they can't learn it. Your job as an instructor is to help them build up from that novice to that expert level, of course, with the student's motivation as well. And that might happen as well because you've oversimplified it, or you just don't have enough knowledge. And then that can lead to the wrong instruction. Not you, but the flight instructor may just not know. Maybe the flight instructor is the parrot and they're saying, well, when I was doing my training, this is how I always did it. Or this is what I learned in my training. But the flight instructor themselves have never actually gone and looked in the procedures, looked in the cars, looked in the EAM to figure that out and to teach something properly. And that's where we just get a generation of pilots of the blind leading the blind. And that's not good. That's not what we want to do. So encouraging them to actually go and engage with material, which is what we're going to look at here in a second. Curriculum gaps, if we're not embracing or using proper learning factors like relationship. If we start doing relationship backwards, you go from complex to basic instead of basic to complex. And then, of course, with all of this underpins the instructor's values, the instructor's attitude, how they approach learning. Is the instructor there just to learn something, to teach something? Are they there to just build flight time, build their pick time so that they can move on and get a job at the airlines? This all can cause students to not actually use or learn threshold concepts within their own discipline. When we're teaching them, we want to help students really engage with that material. And I will say this now. It is difficult, especially now with a new generation of pilots coming up, trying to encourage people to be safe versus just pass an exam by practicing multiple choice questions, which are the worst form of learning that ever exists out there, in my opinion, among some other things, because it encourages only superficial learning and not a deep understanding of a topic. We want to help students, like Create that engaging and supportive environment because you know that it's going to be difficult to learn the cars. It's going to be difficult for a student to look on the AIM to find information. As instructors, when we want them to be safe, we have to help them through it. We can help by hinting at stuff. You can direct them to certain areas of the regulations, but you have to be supportive. When we are teaching, context matters. We're not making things black and white. It's not absolutes, it's this way or that way. If there is a middle ground, that we are teaching that there might be little caveats or a gray area within a regulation or a gray area within a procedure. We don't want to overgeneralize things. So having SOPs, having procedures, context matters. And of course, I've kind of talked about encouraging critical thinking throughout the presentation, but being supportive of them. Allow students to navigate problems, think about problems, give them scenarios to experiment with the knowledge to see how it works properly. This is how we can use threshold concepts in aviation to elevate the next generation of pilots to make sure that they're being safe and not just passing exams and passing flight tests. I have some questions for you to mull over and think about. If you want to do that, you can pause the video on your own time and think about it. I'm going to keep going, otherwise we'll be here for another 2 hours. You can think about things like this. Threshold concepts are here. They're essential for growth. If you want to grow from this to this one day, there are some concepts that you have to master within your discipline to do that growth. Or if you want to stay here, or you are already here and you want to stay there as well, there are some concepts that you need to embrace to grow as a pilot. But embracing these, it fosters a culture of continuous learning, continuous development. We want to encourage pilots to embrace and overcome learning challenges, learning environments that might be there. We want to teach pilots to be resilient so that they're not giving up, so that they can learn something, that they can have deep understanding, and at the end of the day, that they can be safe. One of my big questions I'll ask for you as we wrap the video up is to just reflect on yourself, whether you're here or you're there right now, or you're a chief pilot, or you're a base manager, or whatever, or a fleet manager. It doesn't matter what your role is, but I want you to reflect on where you are and ask yourself what threshold concepts are needed for you to fly in your role, or what concepts are needed for you to be in the role that you're in right now. And just reflect on how you've actually come to that point. You can applaud yourself, give yourself a pat on the back, but think about that for the person that might be coming up in the future, who might be taking that position that you might be leaving sometime soon. Or as you try and train the next generation of pilots, what concepts does someone need to embrace to do what you are doing right now? I'd like to thank a few people, Transport Canada, the team at the Aviation Safety Letter, who have graciously promoted the video very passively and allowed me to do this in a very positive manner. And of course, the Faculty of Education at the University of Windsor for inspiring me to talk about threshold concepts and to contextualize the information in the aviation context. For now, be smart, be safe. If you want to engage with ground school or talk to us, you can reach out to us at flighttrainers.ca.